Should you be using a fiberglass rod or a carbon fiber rod to throw crankbaits? Well, there's definitely some difference between these two rods. That's what we're going to discuss today. Hey, what's happening, guys? Welcome back to the Monster Bass channel. My name is Jeremy with Fishing a Lone Star. If you have not yet checked out my channel over at Fishing a Lone Star, it'll be links below. I'd appreciate you hopping over there and giving me a sub on the channel. And if you're not subbed right here to the Monster Bass channel, you need to be, because there's lots of great content coming at you. Today we are talking about rod selection for crankbaits or for any type of treble style baits. And really the differences between a fiberglass rod, or sometimes people call a glass rod, versus your standard or traditional carbon fiber rod or like a composite rod. So we're gonna talk about the differences between the two, why you should maybe consider a glass rod, or maybe you should stick to a carbon fiber rod for cranking. But why are we talking so much about crankbaits right now? Well, I'll tell you, is because in the summer is a great time to throw a crankbait. Fish are chasing bait fish. They're schooling. Medium diving cranks, deep diving cranks work really well if you can get out on the water. If not, medium diving and shallow diving baits work great from the bank. But in this particular month, I want to highlight one bait really quickly, and it is the Bruiser Cruiser. They came in this month's Monster Bass Regional Pro Bag by Bruiser Baits. Let me pop out of the packaging really quickly and show you this bait, because there's a super unique pattern that I think is just incredible on this bait. Now this is a 4-inch crankbait. It's ½ ounce in size, and you'll notice the bill is a little bit bigger, so it's gonna dive a little bit deeper. I would say somewhere in that 4 to 6 foot range, somewhere in there, and it's all going to depend on the line size that you're using. So the thinner the line, the deeper the crankbait's gonna dive. The thicker the line, the higher it's gonna ride in the water column. So if you wanna dive deeper, throw 10 or 12 pound fluorocarbon. If you want to ride higher, throw 14 or even 17 pound, and that will stay up a little bit higher in the water column. Now, this particular crankbait, I really love that design. It's a great, incredible bluegill pattern. A ton of attention to detail, some really sharp sticky hooks here as well. So in my opinion, I don't think you need to change these out right out of the packaging. And if you head over to Bruiser Baits website, you'll notice that this bait comes in some pretty unique, great colors. This is the gill pattern, but there's several other crawl and shad type patterns as well. So make sure you check out Bruiser Baits, the Bruiser Cruiser crankbait, because that is an incredible bait that came in this month's Regional Pro Bag. All right, so when you're picking up a crankbait, you've got a couple of rod choices to make. You may not know it or not, but you do have some choices. You have a glass rod or a fiberglass rod or a standard carbon fiber, or some people call it composite rod, that you can throw. What are the differences and why? Well, I kind of asked myself that about a year ago, because I was relatively new to throwing glass rods. Didn't really have much experience with it. Wasn't really sure exactly what the differences were, but I kind of went on a limb and picked one up, and I'll tell you now, I don't turn back. When I pick up a crankbait, a lipless crank, a whopper plopper, topwater bait with treble hooks, you're gonna find me almost always throwing a fiberglass rod. So let's talk about the advantages of the fiberglass rod, but then also we'll come back to the carbon fiber rod and why you would still want to maybe throw that when you're throwing a crankbait. So there are applications, and you can use both, right? But let's talk about what you should consider, and maybe why you should consider a fiberglass or a glass rod. All right, so this particular rod I use for my lipless cranks and mid diving cranks, and it is a 7.4 medium heavy, moderate action glass rod, or a fiberglass rod by TFO. Your fiberglass rods are normally a little heavier because they're thicker. That's just the difference in the material that goes into the blanks of a glass rod or a fiberglass rod. But the advantages you get, in my opinion, far outweigh a carbon fiber rod when you're throwing treble hook baits. So let's talk about what those are. The first one is, and really this is the way the rod's made. There's a very soft tip and a lot of parabolic bend in this rod. You'll notice I'm not really even pulling down that hard, but there's a lot of forgiveness in the tip of this rod. First of all, you're gonna be able to cast your crankbaits further. And if you think about it, a crankbait is pretty much like a search bait. You're wanting to cover a lot of ground. you're wanting to cover some water sometimes, even if you know where the fish are, you still want to make some wide casts because schooling fish sometimes can move around and you want to make bombing casts to try to find them. So your fiberglass rod is going to have more bend and therefore it's going to catapult your baits further. The other part of it is because of that bend, you're going to be able to hook into fish easier versus sometimes pulling a bait like this away from fish because a carbon fiber rod is going to be more sensitive. You're going to feel the bait more, you're going to feel the bite more with a carbon fiber rod versus a little bit more of a dampened feel with a fiberglass rod. Now, why is that important? Say you're throwing the Bruiser Cruiser, right? Fish comes up and bites it. Now, if you're throwing a traditional carbon fiber rod, as soon as you feel that bite, because it's a sensitive rod, you're gonna set the hook. Normally, you're gonna pull that bait away from the fish's mouth, or because these are small hooks, you literally, and I've had this happen, will pull the bait out of the fish's mouth. It'll just straight rip out, okay? Now, with a glass rod or a fiberglass rod, when you feel that bite, because it's a dampened feel, it's not as sensitive, you're not gonna feel it as quickly. The fish is gonna be able to consume and hold on to the bait a little bit longer, and when you go to set the hook, the rod is more forgiving, it's gonna bend more. It's more of a smoother, buttery bend, if you will, but that smoother bend is gonna allow the fish to stay hooked up on the initial hook set. So your hook sets are likely gonna be improved with a glass rod over a carbon fiber rod. Okay, so that's one advantage. The other advantage, aside from casting longer, is gonna be then once you've hooked into the fish, the first thing the fish is gonna wanna do is get this bait out of their mouth, okay? The way fish do that is through head shakes. They come to the top water, they jump, they shake. Look, they know how to get stuff out of their mouth that they don't want in their mouth that's stuck there, and that's how, by shaking their head. Now, if you were throwing a carbon fiber rod that's way more sensitive, yes, there's still some bend in the rod, okay? There's still some good bend there, but when I let go, see how quick that bends back? Think about when a fish comes up and shakes their head. If they shake their head and your rod does that, it's pulling the bait quickly out of the fish's mouth as they come up into a head shake. When you have a fiberglass rod, the response to the rod is slower, okay? You may not be able to see that difference, but this rod is not responding as quickly as that one did, right? You probably can't tell in regular time, but trust me, this bend is gonna give a lot more when the fish shakes its head, which means you're gonna keep that fish pinned all the way to the bank, all the way to your boat or kayak, and you're gonna end up having a lot more success landing fish on a treble hook bait with a fiberglass rod than you are with a carbon fiber rod. Now, sometimes your glass rods can be a little bit heavier, again, just because they're a thicker blank that they're made of. So that's sometimes where you get the advantages of a carbon fiber rod, is they're not as heavy, okay? They're a little bit thinner blank. I can show you the difference here of the blank sizes. You'll notice the blank on the carbon fiber on top is thinner than the fiberglass blank on bottom. These are both very similar rods in terms of power, but the carbon fiber rod is more sensitive. So if you're wanting to feel some structure, then you're probably gonna wanna stick to a carbon fiber rod. Now, what I mean by that is if you're throwing, say for example, a lipless crank around grass, say some hydrilla, and you're wanting to tip the top of grass with the tip of the grass and then rip your lipless crank out, you're going to want to throw the carbon fiber rod because you're not gonna be able to feel that grass as easily because, again, this is a dampened feel with a glass rod. So if you're wanting to bring a lipless crank over the top of grass, you're gonna wanna throw the carbon fiber rod, all right? If you're fishing around timber and you want to feel every single little tick, throw the carbon fiber rod. However, I will say that, throwing a crankbait, you're digging into the bottom, you're bouncing off rocks. You're still gonna be able to feel that, okay, with a glass rod. No doubt about it, you're gonna be able to feel it. But it is a dampened feel. That's on purpose. That's the design of the rod. That's the material it's made of. The fiberglass just provides that. And it is a benefit once you get used to it. You'll still feel the bites. You'll still know when a fish is smashed into your crankbait. You'll still feel bottom when your crankbait's digging in the bottom. You'll still feel timber if you run into a stump or a tree. but you might not feel the grass as much with a carbon fiber rod. So if you're wanting to come right across top of grass, throw carbon fiber, all right? If you don't have a glass rod, but you still want to throw crankbaits and you still want to be successful, then go with a moderate action in your carbon fiber. Do not go with a fast action, which again is how fast the tip is and how reactive it is. Go with a moderate action. It's going to be a little bit of a slower response and a deeper bend in the rod. It's going to give you some similar benefits as you would want in a glass rod, but in a carbon fiber. So if you're throwing a traditional carbon fiber or composite rod, go with a moderate action. So I hope that was a quick and efficient breakdown of the differences between those two types of rods. Drop me a question below if you have any at all about rods, and make sure you check out the Bruiser Cruiser bait. Again, this is the gill pattern. It's an awesome design by Bruiser Baits. Check out their website too, because they have several other colors, I believe 5 total or maybe 6, but there's some great patterns and designs. They've really done an incredible job designing these baits and some great hooks that are equipped with them as well. If you've not yet subscribed to Monster Bass, the Regional Pro Bags, go do it. You're not going to regret it. There's some great baits that come each month that are designed just for your region. They're picked out just for you. Me here in Texas, I get the Regional Pro South bag and love it every month. Caught some great fish with it. You can too. All right, Monster Bass, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you check out the other videos to come on this channel and get out and catch a monster bass.